Welcome to Wonderful Stories, a place where imagination comes alive. So let's begin.
Part 1: The champion everyone feared. The engines screamed like wild animals beneath the bright lights of the circuit. Thousands of fans filled the grandstands, their cheers vibrating through the night air as the cars of the Formula One grid lined up at the starting line. 20 drivers. 20 machines capable of reaching over 350 kilometers per hour. But everyone in the world already knew who the real star of the race was: Axel Laurent. Inside the cockpit of his black and crimson Apex racing car, Axel rested his gloved hands on the steering wheel, calm and focused. The cameras loved him. The commentators praised him. The fans worshipped him, because Axel Laurent wasn't just another driver. He was the youngest world champion in Formula One history. At only 25 years old, he had already won 3 championships. And he drove like someone who had nothing to lose. His dark hair was slightly damp with sweat beneath his helmet as the lights above the track flickered red. 5 lights. 4. 3. Inside the Apex Racing garage, mechanics watched the screens nervously. Among them stood a quiet young man wearing a headset and holding a tablet. Kai Mercer. Unlike the other mechanics shouting instructions and watching data streams, Kai stood quietly near the back. His calm gray eyes followed the telemetry numbers scrolling across the screen. Engine temperature, fuel pressure, brake balance. Everything looked normal, but something about the vibration data bothered him. Kai frowned slightly. Before he could think further, the lights went out. The race exploded into motion. 20 cars launched forward like bullets, and Axel Laurent shot ahead instantly. "Laurent takes the lead already," the commentator shouted. Axel's driving was aggressive, fearless, almost reckless. He dove into corners others were afraid to attempt. He overtook cars in places where passing seemed impossible. And by lap 10, he had already created a massive gap. Inside the Apex Racing garage, cheers erupted. "Laurent's flying today. Another easy win." But Kai didn't celebrate. His eyes stayed on the telemetry. The vibration data was climbing. Not much, just slightly, but it shouldn't be happening. Kai leaned closer to the screen. Something inside the engine wasn't aligned perfectly. If the stress kept increasing, the engine might fail. Kai quickly spoke into the team communication channel. "Car 7 is showing abnormal vibration levels," he said calmly. Across the garage, one of the senior engineers frowned. "It's within limits," the engineer replied dismissively. Kai hesitated. It was within limits, but barely, and the numbers were rising. On the track, Axel Laurent pushed the car even harder. Another overtake. Another impossible corner. The crowd roared every time his car appeared on the big screen. Because Axel Laurent didn't just race. He dominated. Lap 18. The vibration warning light flickered on Kai's tablet. His stomach tightened. He spoke again. "We should tell Laurent to reduce engine stress." The senior engineer sighed. "You think Laurent listens to orders?" Everyone in the garage laughed bitterly. Axel Laurent was famous for ignoring team strategy. He did whatever he wanted. Kai didn't laugh, because the engine vibration was rising faster now. Lap 20. Then it happened. On the main straight, Axel's car suddenly jerked violently. A horrible grinding noise echoed through the broadcast. Smoke burst from the back of the car. "Laurent's slowing down." The crowd gasped. Axel cursed inside the cockpit. What the hell just happened? His engine power dropped instantly. Cars behind him blasted past at terrifying speed. Within seconds, he went from first place to 8th. Inside the Apex Racing garage, chaos exploded. Engine failure. How did this happen? Axel slammed his steering wheel in frustration. "Fix your damn car," he shouted through the radio. The comment made several mechanics wince, because Axel always blamed the team first. No matter what happened, the race ended with Axel finishing 7th. For most drivers, that result would still be good. For Axel Laurent, it was a disaster. Hours later, the Apex Racing garage was quiet. The mechanics were dismantling the car piece by piece to find the problem. Axel stormed into the garage, still wearing part of his racing suit. His expression was furious. "Which genius built this engine?" he demanded. No one answered. The team manager stepped forward carefully. "We're still investigating," Axel scoffed. "You cost me the race." His eyes scanned the garage. Then they landed on someone he had never noticed before. Kai Mercer. The quiet mechanic was already studying the dismantled engine with intense focus. Kai pointed at a small internal component. "The alignment bolt shifted during high stress," Kai said calmly. The entire garage fell silent. One of the engineers blinked. "How did you notice that?" Kai held up his tablet. "The vibration pattern showed it." Axel crossed his arms. "So you're saying you knew about the problem?" Kai looked at him without fear. "I warned the team." Several engineers suddenly looked very uncomfortable. Axel's eyes narrowed. "You warned them and didn't fix it?" Kai's voice stayed calm. "I don't have authority to make race decisions." For a moment, tension filled the air. Then Axel stepped closer. Up close, the difference between them was obvious. Axel was tall, confident, intimidating. Kai looked smaller, quieter, but his gaze didn't drop. Axel smirked slightly. "So you're the genius mechanic hiding in the garage." Kai didn't respond. Axel leaned closer. "Next time, fix it before I lose a race." Kai finally spoke. "I would." The garage froze. Axel raised an eyebrow. Kai continued calmly. "But drivers who push engines past safe limits usually don't listen to mechanics." A few people choked, trying not to laugh. Because no one talked to Axel Laurent like that. Axel stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed. A low, amused sound. "Well then, mechanic." He turned and started walking away. "Let's see if you can keep up with me." Kai watched him leave. And for the first time since joining the team, Kai Mercer realized something dangerous. Working with Axel Laurent was going to be a nightmare. But somehow, he had the strange feeling this arrogant driver was about to change his life. And neither of them knew yet that their fates were about to collide faster than any car on the track. Part 2: The Mechanic Who Refused to Bow. Morning sunlight spilled across the paddock as another race weekend began. The massive garages of the Formula One teams buzzed with activity. Engineers moved quickly between workstations, mechanics rolled tire sets across the floor, and journalists crowded the pit lane hoping to catch a glimpse of the drivers. Inside the Apex Racing garage, tension hung in the air. The last race had been a disaster. Axel Laurent finishing 7th had shocked the entire racing world. For the first time in 2 seasons, the champion had looked vulnerable. And Axel hated it. The moment he entered the garage, the noise dropped. Mechanics greeted him cautiously. "Morning, Laurent." Axel barely acknowledged them as he walked straight toward his car. The engine cover was removed, exposing the complex machinery beneath. Standing beside it was the quiet mechanic who had embarrassed half the engineering team the previous night. Kai Mercer. Kai was already working, tightening bolts and adjusting the engine mount with precise, controlled movements. Axel watched him for a moment. Unlike the other mechanics who became nervous around him, Kai seemed completely unaffected by his presence. Axel crossed his arms. "So you're the guy who thinks he understands my car better than the engineers." Kai didn't even look up. "I didn't say that. You implied it." Kai calmly finished tightening the bolt before finally glancing up. "I said the engine vibration pattern suggested a loose alignment bolt." Axel smirked. "And you were right." Kai returned his attention to the engine. Silence filled the garage for a moment. Then Axel spoke again. "Team manager told me you're working on my car this weekend." Kai nodded slightly. "Yes." Axel raised an eyebrow. "You don't seem excited." Kai wiped grease from his gloves. "I'm here to fix the car. Not you." Even though Kai didn't say those last words out loud, Axel somehow heard them anyway. Axel leaned closer to the exposed engine. "Good," he said, "because I drive aggressively." I noticed. A few mechanics nearby tried very hard not to laugh. Axel chuckled. "So tell me something, Mercer." Kai looked up again. "Why didn't you try to stop the race last time if you knew the engine might fail?" Kai's expression remained calm. "Drivers don't like being told to slow down." Axel grinned slightly. Smart mechanic. Then he added, but I still lost because of your engine. Kai tilted his head. No. Axel frowned. Kai spoke calmly, his gray eyes steady. You lost because you kept pushing even when the vibration warnings appeared. The garage went silent. Axel Laurent was used to people blaming the car, blaming the team, blaming strategy. But no one ever blamed him. Axel stared at Kai for a long moment. You're bold for a mechanic. Kai shrugged slightly. You asked. Before Axel could respond, the team manager hurried into the garage. Laurent, media interviews in 10 minutes. Axel sighed dramatically. Great. More people asking stupid questions. As he turned to leave, he glanced back at Kai. Don't break my car again. Kai replied instantly. Don't break my engine again. Axel laughed as he walked away. For the first time in weeks, the champion looked entertained. 2 hours later, practice sessions began. The roar of engines echoed across the track as the drivers prepared their cars. Axel climbed into his cockpit. Before lowering his helmet visor, he glanced toward the garage. Kai stood near the pit wall holding a headset, watching the monitors. Their eyes met briefly. Axel spoke into the radio. All right, Mercer. Kai's voice came through the headset calmly. This is Mercer. Let's see if you actually fixed my car. Kai replied simply. Drive. The car shot out of the pit lane. Within seconds, Axel pushed the engine hard. Corner after corner. Lap after lap. The Apex car moved like a predator on the track. Inside the garage, the telemetry data scrolled rapidly. Kai studied the numbers carefully. Engine temperature stable. Fuel pressure normal. Vibration levels steady. Axel's voice crackled through the radio again. Feels smoother. Kai didn't respond immediately. He adjusted a setting on the tablet. You're still pushing too hard in Sector 2. Axel laughed. You watching my driving now? Yes. Axel smirked behind his helmet. Careful, Mercer. You're starting to sound like my race engineer. Kai replied calmly. Your race engineer agrees with me. The engineer sitting nearby nodded vigorously. Axel sighed dramatically. Everyone loves telling the champion what to do. Kai's voice remained steady. You're 3/10 faster if you take turn 6 wider. Axel blinked. 3/10. That's what the data says. Axel hesitated. Then he tried it. Next lap. Turn 6. He followed Kai's suggestion. The car glided through the corner more smoothly. His lap time flashed on the screen. 3/10 faster. Axel's eyebrows lifted slightly. Not bad, Mercer. Kai simply replied. Focus on the next lap. For the rest of the session, Axel followed Kai's instructions more than he expected. And something strange happened. The car felt perfect. When the session ended, Axel returned to the garage. He climbed out of the car and removed his helmet. Sweat dampened his hair, but his expression looked different. Less irritated. More curious. He walked straight toward Kai. The other mechanics watched carefully. Because Axel Laurent approaching someone usually meant trouble. Axel stopped in front of him. You changed the suspension balance. Kai nodded. Yes. Axel folded his arms. Why? You drive aggressively into corners. Axel blinked. That's the point of racing. Kai shook his head slightly. Most drivers brake first. Axel smirked. I'm not most drivers. Kai replied calmly. Exactly. The garage waited. Then Axel did something unexpected. He laughed. A genuine laugh. Well, Mercer. He held out his hand toward the engine. Looks like you actually know what you're doing. Kai glanced at him, then returned to tightening another bolt. I told you. Axel smiled faintly. For the first time in his career, someone in the garage wasn't afraid of him. And strangely enough, Axel Laurent was starting to like that. But neither of them knew yet that the upcoming race would push their fragile partnership to the edge. Because in Formula 1, one mistake could destroy everything. Part 3. The crash that changed everything. The afternoon sun burned over the circuit as race day arrived. Grandstands were packed with tens of thousands of screaming fans. Cameras flashed, commentators shouted, and the tension of the championship hung heavy in the air. Another brutal round of the Formula One was about to begin. Inside the Apex Racing garage, mechanics rushed around the car with intense focus. Axel Laurent stood beside the cockpit, adjusting his racing gloves. His expression was calm, confident, almost bored. To the outside world, Axel looked untouchable. But inside the garage, one person noticed the small signs others missed. Kai Mercer. Kai stood near the telemetry monitors, studying the final data checks. Engine temperature, fuel mixture, brake pressure. Everything looked perfect. Still, his sharp eyes moved carefully across the screen. Kai trusted numbers more than people. Behind him, the team manager approached Axel. Starting position. Second on the grid, the manager said. Play it safe in the first lap. Axel smirked. I don't do safe. The manager sighed. Of course he didn't. Across the garage, Kai spoke quietly through the headset. Axel. The champion turned his head slightly. Axel still wasn't used to the mechanic addressing him directly. What? Kai walked closer. Your rear tire temperature is climbing faster than expected. Axel shrugged. That's normal. Kai shook his head. No, it's not. Axel raised an eyebrow. Then what do you want me to do? Kai looked directly at him. Don't attack the first corner too aggressively. For a moment, silence hung between them. Axel leaned closer with a teasing smile. You sound worried. Kai didn't smile. I prefer not rebuilding a destroyed car tonight. A few mechanics nearby laughed nervously. Axel chuckled. Relax, Mercer. He placed his helmet on. I'm the best driver in the world. Kai replied calmly. Even the best drivers crash. Axel didn't respond, but the words stayed in his mind as he climbed into the cockpit. Minutes later, the cars lined up on the grid. Engines roared like thunder across the circuit. 5 red lights glowed above the track. Axel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His rival sat directly ahead in pole position. A driver from Titan Motors. Someone Axel hated losing to. Inside the Apex garage, Kai watched the telemetry carefully. His eyes moved between the screens and the track. Something about Axel's tire temperature still bothered him. The lights flickered. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The lights went out. The race exploded into motion. Axel launched forward perfectly. His car shot beside the Titan Motors driver instantly. Side by side, 2 cars racing toward the first corner at nearly 300 kilometers per hour. Inside the garage, the engineers shouted. He's attacking already. Kai's eyes narrowed. Axel was pushing too hard. The first corner approached. Axel refused to brake. Instead, he pushed even faster, diving into the turn aggressively. For a moment, it worked. His car slid ahead of the rival. But then the rear tires lost grip. Kai's heart dropped. Axel! The back of the car snapped violently sideways. At that speed, there was no recovery. The car spun across the track. The tires screamed. Axel slammed into the barrier with a deafening crash. The entire stadium gasped. Carbon fiber exploded across the track. Smoke filled the air. Inside the Apex garage, everyone froze. Laurent crashed. Kai's headset crackled with emergency radio signals. For several terrifying seconds, there was no response from the car. Kai's chest tightened painfully. Axel? He said into the radio. Silence. Then finally, Axel's voice came through. I'm fine. The garage exploded with relieved sighs. But the race was over. The once perfect Apex car was completely destroyed. 2 hours later, the wrecked car sat in the garage like a broken machine. Pieces of the bodywork were scattered across the floor. Axel walked inside slowly. His racing suit was slightly torn. A small cut marked his eyebrow. But otherwise he looked fine. The entire team went quiet. Axel stared at the destroyed car. Then he looked at Kai. You predicted that. Kai didn't answer immediately. I warned you about the tire temperature. Axel rubbed the back of his neck. For once, the arrogant champion looked slightly embarrassed. Yeah. Silence filled the garage. Finally, Axel sighed. All right. The entire team stared at him, because Axel Laurent almost never admitted mistakes. He glanced at Kai. You were right. Kai blinked slightly, then nodded. Next time listen earlier. Axel laughed softly. You're surprisingly annoying for someone who barely talks. Kai shrugged. Someone has to keep you alive. For a moment the tension disappeared. Then Axel stepped closer to the wrecked car. His voice became quieter. You think we can still win the championship? Kai looked at the broken machine, then back at Axel. Yes. Axel raised an eyebrow. You're confident. Kai crossed his arms. Your driving is reckless. Axel smirked. That's why people watch. Kai continued calmly. But if you follow my adjustments. He paused. Your car will be faster than everyone else's. Axel stared at him for a moment, then slowly smiled. Well, Mercer. He held out his hand toward the damaged car. Looks like I'm trusting you with my career. Kai looked at the car too. And for the first time since joining Apex Racing, Kai realized something dangerous. He didn't just want to fix Axel's car anymore. He wanted Axel Laurent to win. And that realization scared him more than the crash itself. Because working closely with the most arrogant driver in Formula One was one thing. But starting to care about him? That could ruin everything. Part 4, Nights in the Garage. The crash changed everything. Not just for the championship standings, but for Axel Laurent. And for Kai Mercer. 3 days after the accident, the Apex Racing garage was unusually quiet. Most of the team had already left for the night, exhausted after rebuilding the damaged car. But one corner of the garage was still brightly lit. Kai Mercer sat on a rolling chair beside the exposed engine, studying lines of telemetry data on his tablet. He had been there for hours. The crash replayed in his mind again and again. The moment Axel's rear tires lost grip. The spin. The impact. Kai sighed softly. He could have prevented it. If he had pushed harder. If he had convinced the engineers. If Axel had listened sooner. Across the empty garage, footsteps echoed. Kai didn't look up. Garage closes in 20 minutes, he said automatically. The footsteps stopped beside him. A familiar voice answered. I own the car you're fixing. Kai glanced up. Axel Laurent stood there wearing a black jacket and jeans, his dark hair still slightly messy. Without the racing suit and helmet, he looked different. Less like a champion. More like a normal man. Kai frowned slightly. What are you doing here? Axel shrugged. Couldn't sleep. Kai returned his attention to the engine. That's not my problem. Axel smirked. You're always this friendly? Kai ignored him. For a moment, Axel simply watched him work. The quiet mechanic's focus was intense. Precise. Like every bolt and wire mattered deeply to him. Finally, Axel spoke again. You've been here all night? Yes. Why? Kai tightened another bolt. Because the suspension response during the crash showed instability. Axel blinked. You're fixing something from the crash? Kai nodded. If it happens again at higher speed, you might not walk away. Axel leaned against the workbench. So you're protecting me now? Kai didn't look up. I'm protecting the car. Axel laughed quietly. Liar. Kai paused for a moment, then continued working. Axel folded his arms, watching. You know something, Mercer? What? You're the only person in the entire Formula One paddock who talks to me like I'm not a world champion. Kai responded calmly. You drive fast. That's an understatement. Kai shrugged. But engines don't care about fame. Axel chuckled. Fair point. Silence settled between them again. But this time it wasn't uncomfortable. After a few minutes, Axel walked closer to the car. What are you changing? Kai pointed to the rear suspension assembly. The load distribution. Axel leaned over the car to look. You think that caused the spin? Partly. Axel studied the exposed machinery. You're young to be leading engine adjustments. Kai shrugged. Someone had to fix it. Axel glanced at him. Why did you become a mechanic anyway? Kai paused. That question surprised him. Engines make sense, he said simply. Axel raised an eyebrow. People don't. Kai looked at him briefly. No. Axel laughed again. Now that I believe. Kai finally sat back on the rolling chair. You should rest. Axel ignored the suggestion. Instead, he grabbed a tool from the workbench. Kai immediately frowned. What are you doing? Helping. Kai stared at him. You're a driver. Axel smirked. I'm not useless. Before Kai could stop him, Axel leaned into the car and tightened a bolt. Not perfectly, but correctly. Kai blinked. You know how to do that? Axel shrugged. My father owned a garage. Kai studied him more carefully. That explains a lot. Axel grinned. Explains why I'm handsome and talented? Kai deadpanned. No. Explains why you break cars. Axel burst out laughing. For the next hour, they worked together. Axel handed tools. Kai adjusted parts. They argued about small details. But slowly, something strange happened. They started working in rhythm, like they understood each other. Finally, Kai finished the last adjustment. The engine was complete again. Axel stepped back, wiping grease from his hands. Feels weird seeing my car like this. Kai looked at the machine quietly. To me, this is the best part. Axel tilted his head. Why? Kai tapped the engine lightly. Because this is where speed begins. Axel studied him, then smiled slightly. You really love this stuff. Kai didn't deny it. Outside the garage windows, the night sky stretched quietly over the track. Axel suddenly spoke again. You know, if you keep improving the car like this. Kai looked at him. What? Axel's voice was calm but serious. We might actually win another championship. Kai crossed his arms. That's the plan. Axel smirked. You're confident. Kai replied simply. You're fast. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Axel added softly. And you're the only mechanic who can keep up with me. Kai didn't know why those words felt heavier than they should. But something about the way Axel said them made his chest tighten slightly. Because somewhere during those long nights in the garage, their rivalry was quietly becoming something else. And neither of them had noticed yet. But someone else had. Across the paddock, a rival driver watched the Apex garage lights still glowing late at night. And he was starting to wonder something dangerous. Why was the world champion suddenly spending so much time with a mechanic? And more importantly, was that mechanic becoming Axel Laurent's greatest strength? Or his greatest weakness? Part 5: The Sabotage. Race weekend arrived again. The atmosphere around the circuit buzzed with anticipation. After Axel Laurent's dramatic crash in the last race, the entire world of Formula One was watching closely. Was the champion still unbeatable? Or had his dominance finally begun to crack? Inside the Apex Racing garage, mechanics moved with sharp focus around the rebuilt car. The sleek black machine looked perfect again. Stronger, faster, and thanks to Kai Mercer's adjustments, the car handled better than it ever had before. Kai stood near the front wing, quietly studying the final telemetry data. Everything looked flawless. Axel's footsteps echoed across the garage. Morning, Mercer. Kai glanced up briefly. Morning. Axel leaned casually against the car. Tell me something. Kai continued checking numbers. What? You've been working on this car like your life depends on it. Kai didn't look up. It does. Axel smirked. You're dramatic. Kai finally glanced at him. If this car fails again, you'll blame the team. Axel shrugged. Fair. Kai returned to the screen. And the team will blame the mechanic. Axel tilted his head slightly. You worried? Kai's voice stayed calm. No. Axel smiled faintly. You're getting confident. Before Kai could reply, the team manager called out. Practice session starts in 15 minutes. The garage suddenly exploded into activity. Mechanics rolled tire carts forward. Engineers connected laptops. Axel grabbed his helmet. But before he climbed into the cockpit, he glanced back at Kai. Don't worry. Kai looked at him. I'll try not to destroy your engine today. Kai replied instantly. That would be appreciated. Axel laughed as he stepped into the car. Minutes later, the car roared onto the track. Axel immediately pushed hard. Lap after lap. The Apex car moved with terrifying speed. Inside the garage, the telemetry screens glowed with data. Kai studied them carefully. Engine temperature stable. Suspension balance perfect. Lap time, fastest on the track. Kai allowed himself a small breath of relief. Maybe everything would finally go smoothly. But across the pit lane, someone else was watching. Victor Navarro, a rival driver from Titan Motors. Victor leaned against the garage wall, staring toward the Apex team. His eyes followed Axel's car as it screamed past on the track. Victor's jaw tightened. For years, Axel Laurent had been the golden star of Formula One. Winning races, winning championships, taking all the spotlight. Victor hated him for it. But something else had caught Victor's attention recently. The mechanic, Kai Mercer. Victor had noticed the late nights, the quiet conversations, the way Axel now listened to someone in the garage. Victor smiled slowly. Everyone had a weakness. Maybe Axel Laurent's weakness was the mechanic. Practice ended with Axel finishing the session in first place. As the car rolled back into the garage, the team celebrated loudly. Fastest lap. Laurent's back. Axel climbed out of the cockpit, grinning. See, Mercer? Your engine survived. Kai glanced at the data tablet. For now, Axel chuckled. You're impossible to impress. Kai ignored him. Instead, his eyes narrowed slightly at something on the screen. Axel noticed. What? Kai scrolled through the data again. Then he walked toward the car. Slowly, carefully. His fingers moved across a section near the rear wing. Then he froze. Something wasn't right. Kai crouched lower, inspecting a small component near the suspension. The bolt was loose. Very loose. Kai's stomach dropped. That bolt had been perfectly tightened earlier. He had checked it himself. Axel noticed the sudden tension in Kai's posture. What is it? Kai stood up slowly. Someone had tampered with the car. His voice became colder than usual. This bolt was loosened. Axel frowned. During practice? Kai shook his head. No. Axel's eyes darkened. Then when? Kai looked around the garage carefully. His mind raced. Only team members should have access to the car. But the paddock was crowded. Drivers, engineers, visitors, sponsors. Anyone could have slipped inside for a moment. Axel crossed his arms. Would it have caused a failure? Kai nodded slightly. If you pushed the car hard enough, the suspension could collapse. Axel let out a slow breath. That would have been a very bad crash. Kai didn't reply. His gray eyes moved toward the pit lane outside. Someone had tried to sabotage Axel's car. And that meant one thing. Someone wanted Axel Laurent out of the championship. Axel leaned closer to Kai. You think it was an accident? Kai met his gaze. No. Axel's voice dropped. So someone's playing dirty. Kai nodded. For a moment, the two of them stood in silence beside the car. Then Axel smirked slightly. Well, he cracked his knuckles. Guess we'll just have to win anyway. Kai surprised himself by saying something he hadn't planned. I won't let anything happen to the car. Axel looked at him. And I won't let anything happen to you. The words slipped out naturally. But the moment they were spoken, both of them went quiet. Kai quickly looked back at the car. Axel rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Across the garage, Victor Navarro watched the interaction from a distance. A slow smile formed on his face. Because now he knew. The mechanic wasn't just Axel Laurent's engineer. He was something more important. And in a championship battle, knowing your rival's weakness could be the key to destroying them. Part 6: The Target. The atmosphere in the Apex Racing garage had changed. No one said it out loud. But everyone felt it. Someone had tampered with Axel Laurent's car. And in the ruthless world of Formula One, sabotage was not unheard of. But it was rare enough to make everyone uneasy. Kai Mercer had checked the bolt again. Then twice more. Now he stood beside the car with his tablet, reviewing every system one more time. Engine alignment, suspension torque, rear wing structure. Everything was perfect again. Still, his mind refused to relax. Across the garage, Axel Laurent finished a short interview with a journalist. The reporter smiled brightly. Fans are wondering if your recent crash affected your confidence. Axel smirked lazily. Confidence isn't the problem. Oh, the problem, Axel said casually, is people trying to keep up with me. The journalist laughed nervously and moved away. Axel walked back toward the car. He noticed Kai still staring at the telemetry screens. You're checking again? Kai didn't look up. Yes. Axel crossed his arms. You already checked everything 3 times. Kai scrolled through the data. 4. Axel sighed. Mercer. Kai finally glanced at him. What? You're going to wear yourself out before the race even starts. Kai's expression stayed calm. That's better than letting someone destroy the car. Axel studied him carefully. The quiet mechanic looked exactly the same as always. But something in his eyes had changed. He looked protective. Axel leaned closer to the car. You really think someone here sabotaged it? Kai nodded. The bolt wasn't loose by accident. Axel frowned. So someone wants me to crash again. Kai's voice dropped slightly. Yes. For a moment Axel said nothing. Then he suddenly laughed. Kai blinked. What? Axel shrugged. I guess that means I'm still the biggest threat on the grid. Kai stared at him. You're not taking this seriously. Axel tilted his head. I am. Kai closed the tablet. Then stop joking. Axel's smile faded slightly. Kai continued. If the suspension failed at high speed, you could have been seriously injured. Axel looked at him quietly. Worried about me? Kai hesitated. I'm worried about the car. Axel smirked again. Liar. Before Kai could respond, the team manager called out. Qualifying begins in 10 minutes. The garage exploded into motion again. Mechanics rushed to prepare the car. Axel grabbed his helmet. But before stepping into the cockpit, he looked back at Kai. Don't stress so much. Kai didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the front wing and inspected it again. Axel watched him for a second, then climbed into the car. Qualifying began under bright stadium lights. The roar of engines echoed across the circuit as drivers fought for the best starting positions. Axel Laurent pushed the car harder than ever. Lap after lap, the Apex car sliced through corners with terrifying precision. Inside the garage, the engineers shouted, Fastest sector. Kai stared at the telemetry. Everything was stable. Perfect. The suspension fix was working. Axel's final lap came. The car flew around the circuit like a missile. When he crossed the finish line, the screen flashed. Pole position. The garage erupted in cheers. Axel Laurent had secured first place on the starting grid. Again. But Kai barely reacted. Instead, he kept watching the data carefully. Something still bothered him. Across the pit lane, another garage door opened. Victor Navarro stepped out slowly. He glanced toward the Apex garage. Then his eyes landed on Kai. Victor smiled slightly, because he had learned something interesting today. The quiet mechanic was the one protecting Axel's car. Which meant, if something happened to the mechanic, the champion might lose his advantage. Later that evening, the paddock was quieter. Most teams had finished their work. Kai walked alone toward the storage area behind the garages. He needed a specific tool to recalibrate one of the engine sensors. The hallway behind the garages was dimly lit. Footsteps echoed softly. Kai reached the storage door. But before he could open it, a voice spoke behind him. Busy mechanic. Kai turned slowly. Victor Navarro stood there with a relaxed smile. Kai recognized him instantly, one of Axel's biggest rivals. What do you want? Kai asked calmly. Victor shrugged. Just curious. About what? Victor stepped closer. You. Kai frowned slightly. Why? Victor's eyes glinted. Because the champion suddenly listens to you. Kai didn't answer. Victor continued walking closer. You must be very important to him. Kai met his gaze without fear. I fix his car. Victor smiled. That's what worries me. Kai's expression hardened. If you're done talking, I have work to do. Victor leaned against the wall casually. You know. He glanced toward the Apex garage in the distance. If something happened to you, Kai narrowed his eyes. What? Victor's smile widened slightly. Laurent might start losing races again. Silence filled the hallway. Kai finally understood. Victor had been the one trying to sabotage the car. Kai's voice became colder. You should leave. Victor pushed himself off the wall. Relax. He walked past Kai slowly. I'm just saying. Victor stopped beside him. Champions sometimes fall when their support disappears. Then Victor walked away. Kai stood still in the quiet hallway. His hands tightened slightly. Now he knew for sure. Someone wasn't just targeting Axel's car anymore. They were targeting him. And Kai realized something dangerous. If anything happened to him, Axel Laurent might actually lose the championship. Part 7, the race that could destroy everything. Race day arrived like a storm. The circuit roared with excitement as thousands of fans packed the grandstands. Cameras flashed everywhere. Reporters shouted into microphones, and the tension surrounding the championship was thicker than ever. At the center of it all stood one name everyone was watching: Axel Laurent. After securing pole position during qualifying, the champion was once again expected to dominate the race in the world of Formula One. But inside the Apex Racing garage, the atmosphere was far from relaxed. Kai Mercer barely slept the night before. Victor Navarro's words echoed in his mind. If something happened to you, Laurent might start losing races again. Kai stood beside the car now, checking every part for the 5th time. Suspension bolts, brake lines, engine mounts. Nothing was out of place. But the uneasy feeling refused to disappear. Across the garage, Axel finished stretching his arms before climbing into his racing suit. He noticed Kai crouched beside the car again. You're still checking? Kai nodded without looking up. Yes. Axel walked closer. Mercer. Kai finally looked at him. What? You've checked every bolt on that car more times than the engineers. Kai stood up slowly. That's because someone already tried to sabotage it. Axel crossed his arms. And you think they'll try again? Kai hesitated for a second. Yes. Axel studied him carefully. Did something happen last night? Kai considered telling him about Victor, but he stopped himself. Instead, he simply said, just be careful. Axel smirked slightly. You're definitely worried about me. Kai replied calmly, I'm worried about my work. Axel chuckled. Sure you are. Before Kai could respond, the team manager shouted across the garage. Drivers to the grid in 5 minutes. Mechanics rushed around the car, attaching the final components. Tires were rolled into position. The engine roared to life. Kai stepped back as Axel climbed into the cockpit. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Axel lowered his helmet visor. Relax, Mercer. Kai said nothing. Axel added, I'll bring the car back in one piece. Kai finally replied softly, You better. The starting grid was electric. 20 cars lined up under the blazing lights. Engines screamed like wild animals waiting to be released. The red lights above the track glowed one by one. Inside the Apex garage, Kai stood frozen in front of the telemetry screens. His eyes moved rapidly across the data. Everything looked stable. Still, his chest felt tight. 5 lights. 4, 3, 2, 1. The lights went out. The race exploded into motion. Axel launched perfectly from pole position. His car shot forward ahead of the pack. Inside the garage, engineers cheered. He kept the lead. Kai kept watching the numbers. Lap after lap passed. Axel drove flawlessly. The Apex car sliced through corners like a blade. Gap to second place, 2 seconds. Then 3. Then 4. Axel was dominating again. But on lap 12, something strange appeared on Kai's screen. The rear wing angle sensor flickered. Kai frowned. That sensor should not be fluctuating. He quickly checked the backup readings. The numbers jumped again. Kai's stomach dropped. Someone had tampered with the rear wing mechanism. If the wing failed at high speed, the car could lose downforce instantly. At 300 kilometers per hour, Kai grabbed the radio. Axel. Axel's voice came through the headset calmly. Yeah. Your rear wing sensor is unstable. Axel's tone sharpened slightly. How unstable. Kai studied the numbers. Not enough to fail yet. Axel sighed. Then relax. Kai shook his head. No. Axel frowned behind the helmet. Explain. Kai's voice dropped. If the wing collapses at high speed, you could spin. Axel went quiet, because they both remembered the last crash. Kai continued. Come into the pit. Axel immediately replied. No. Kai's chest tightened. Axel. I'm leading the race. I know. Then I'm not pitting. Kai clenched his fists. You might crash. Axel's voice softened slightly. You think I'm scared of crashing? Kai didn't answer, but Axel continued. I'm not. Inside the garage, the engineers looked nervous. Kai knew Axel's personality too well. Once the champion decided something, no one could change his mind. Unless, Kai took a breath. Then he spoke again into the radio. His voice was quieter this time. If you crash again. Axel waited. Kai finished the sentence. I won't be able to fix the car. For a moment, the radio was silent. Axel exhaled slowly. You're unbelievable, Mercer. Kai said nothing. Finally, Axel spoke again. Fine. The engineers stared in shock. Because the impossible had just happened. Axel Laurent had listened. The champion drove into the pit lane on the next lap. Mechanics swarmed the car instantly. Kai rushed forward. He crouched beside the rear wing mechanism. One glance was enough. The adjustment screw had been deliberately loosened. Kai tightened it quickly. Done. The pit stop lasted only 6 seconds. Axel shot back onto the track. He had lost the lead. But the race was far from over. Lap by lap, Axel began chasing the leader again. Inside the garage, Kai watched the screens intensely. The car was stable again. Perfect. With 10 laps remaining, Axel finally caught his rival. Victor Navarro. The Titan Motors car blocked the track aggressively. Axel's voice came through the radio. Guess who's in front of me? Kai didn't need to check. Navarro. Axel smirked. He's driving like he really wants to win today. Kai's eyes narrowed slightly. Yes. Axel pushed harder. The cars raced side by side, corner after corner. Finally, on the longest straight, Axel attacked. His car blasted past Victor at incredible speed. The crowd exploded with cheers. Inside the garage, everyone shouted. Laurent takes the lead. Axel crossed the finish line minutes later. First place. Again. The Apex garage erupted in celebration. But Kai barely reacted. Because he knew something no one else did. The sabotage hadn't been an accident. And Victor Navarro had been directly involved. When Axel returned to the garage, he climbed out of the car smiling. See? He looked at Kai. Told you I'd bring it back in one piece. Kai stared at him for a moment. Then said quietly, next time listen sooner. Axel laughed. Then he noticed Kai's expression. You're still worried about something. Kai hesitated. Because now he knew the truth. Victor Navarro wasn't finished yet. And the next move might not target the car. It might target Axel. Or worse, Kai himself. Part 8. The Confrontation. Victory celebrations filled the Apex Racing garage. Champagne sprayed through the air. Mechanics cheered loudly. And reporters crowded around Axel Laurent as cameras flashed in every direction. Another win. Another dominant performance in the brutal world of Formula One. But while everyone else celebrated, one person remained quiet. Kai Mercer. He stood near the back of the garage, reviewing the race telemetry once more on his tablet. The numbers confirmed what he already knew. The rear wing screw had been loosened deliberately. Sabotage. Kai closed the tablet slowly. Across the garage, Axel finally escaped the reporters and walked toward him. He still held a half-open champagne bottle. Mercer. Kai looked up. You won. Axel grinned. I noticed. Kai nodded once. Congratulations. Axel tilted his head. That's it. Kai shrugged. You asked for the car to be fast. Axel laughed. You're unbelievable. Then Axel studied his face more carefully. Something's bothering you. Kai didn't answer. Axel stepped closer. Mercer. What? You've been tense all day. Kai glanced toward the open garage entrance where other teams were packing equipment. Then he looked back at Axel. There was sabotage. Axel nodded slowly. I figured. Kai blinked slightly. You did. Axel leaned against the car. That rear wing didn't loosen itself. Kai hesitated. There's more. Axel's expression sharpened. What? Kai took a breath. Victor Navarro spoke to me last night. Axel's eyes darkened instantly. What did he say? Kai's voice remained calm. He implied that if something happened to me... He paused. You might start losing races. Silence filled the garage. Axel slowly placed the champagne bottle down. His relaxed expression disappeared completely. What? Kai crossed his arms. He thinks I'm your weakness. For a moment Axel said nothing. Then he suddenly started walking toward the garage exit. Kai frowned. Where are you going? Axel's voice was cold. To talk. Kai immediately grabbed his arm. No. Axel stopped. Kai rarely touched anyone. The sudden contact surprised both of them. Let it go, Kai said quietly. Axel looked down at Kai's hand still gripping his sleeve. Why? Because confronting him will only make things worse. Axel's eyes were burning now. He threatened you. Kai shook his head. He threatened the car. Axel stepped closer. No. His voice dropped. He threatened you. Kai tried to pull his hand away, but Axel caught his wrist instead. Their eyes locked. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Axel said something unexpected. You're not just my mechanic anymore. Kai froze. Axel continued. You're the reason my car works. Kai looked away slightly. That's my job. Axel shook his head. No. He tightened his grip slightly. You're the only person in this entire paddock who tells me the truth. Kai didn't know how to respond. Axel exhaled slowly. Which means Navarro just made a huge mistake. Before Kai could stop him again, Axel released his wrist and walked out of the garage. Kai cursed under his breath and followed. The paddock behind the garages was quiet at night. Most teams had already packed their equipment. Only a few lights remained on. Victor Navarro stood beside the Titan Motors truck, speaking with his engineer. When he saw Axel approaching, he smirked slightly. Well, if it isn't the champion. Axel stopped a few steps away. Kai arrived seconds later, breathing slightly heavier. Axel, don't. But Axel raised a hand to stop him. His eyes never left Victor. You talked to my mechanic. Victor shrugged casually. We had a conversation. Axel stepped closer. What exactly did you say to him? Victor's smile widened. Just that you might struggle without him. Kai stepped between them slightly. This is pointless. Victor ignored him. You know, Victor continued. It's interesting. Axel's voice dropped dangerously. What is? Victor gestured toward Kai. You used to be unstoppable. He tilted his head. But now you depend on a mechanic. Kai's expression hardened. That's how racing works. Victor laughed. Not like this. He looked directly at Axel. Champions shouldn't need someone that much. For a moment, Axel looked like he might punch him. But instead he smiled. A slow, confident smile. You're wrong. Victor frowned slightly. Axel placed one hand casually in his pocket. Every champion needs the right team. Victor scoffed. So you admit he's your weakness? Axel shook his head. No. He glanced briefly at Kai. Mercer isn't my weakness. Victor raised an eyebrow. Then what is he? Axel looked back at him calmly. He's the reason I keep winning. Victor's smirk faded. Axel continued. And if you try touching my car again, his voice turned cold, or bothering my mechanic, the silence between them became sharp. You won't finish the championship. Victor stared at him for a moment. Then he laughed softly. Protective, aren't you? Axel didn't respond. Victor finally shrugged. Relax. He walked past them. But championships aren't decided in conversations. Then he disappeared into the Titan Motors garage. The paddock fell quiet again. Axel exhaled slowly. Kai looked at him. You shouldn't provoke him. Axel shrugged. He started it. Kai sighed. Now he'll try something else. Axel glanced at him sideways. You worried? Kai crossed his arms. Yes. Axel smiled slightly. Good. Kai frowned. Why? Axel walked back toward the garage. Because it means you care if I win. Kai stood there for a moment, then muttered quietly to himself. Idiot. But he followed anyway, because somewhere along the way, Axel Laurent had become more than just the driver whose car he fixed. And that realization was far more dangerous than anything Victor Navarro could do. Part 9, the final race. The championship came down to one final race. After months of brutal competition in Formula One, everything would be decided tonight. One track, one race, one winner. The entire world was watching. Inside the Apex Racing garage, the tension was thick enough to feel. Mechanics moved carefully around the car, checking every component with absolute precision. No one wanted to make a mistake now, not when the championship trophy was within reach. Kai Mercer stood beside the front wing with his tablet, silently reviewing the final telemetry data. Everything looked perfect, but he still checked again and again. Across the garage, Axel Laurent finished putting on his racing gloves. For once, the usually arrogant champion looked serious, because this race mattered more than any other. If he won tonight, he would become a 4-time world champion. If he lost, Victor Navarro would take the title instead. Axel walked toward Kai. You're still checking the car? Kai didn't look up. Yes. Axel leaned casually against the car. Mercer. Kai finally glanced at him. What? You're making the engineers nervous. Kai returned to the screen. That's their problem. Axel smiled faintly. For months, the quiet mechanic had been the only person who never treated him like a superstar. And strangely enough, Axel had started to depend on that. Everything okay? Axel asked. Kai hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Axel studied him carefully. You're lying. Kai sighed softly. Victor is desperate. Axel shrugged. So am I. Kai finally looked at him fully. No. Axel tilted his head. What do you mean? Kai closed the tablet. You want to win. Axel nodded. Obviously. Kai's voice softened slightly. But he needs to win. Axel blinked. Big difference. Kai explained quietly. If Victor loses, his team will replace him next season. Axel frowned. So desperate drivers take bigger risks. Axel smiled slowly. Good. Kai crossed his arms. That doesn't worry you? Axel shook his head. I've beaten him before. Kai studied him for a moment, then said something unexpected. Just don't crash. Axel raised an eyebrow. Now you're definitely worried about me. Kai looked away slightly. I'm worried about the car. Axel laughed softly. You're a terrible liar. For a moment they simply stood beside the car. Then Axel spoke again. Hey Mercer. Kai glanced back. What? If I win tonight? Kai waited. You're celebrating with the team. Kai frowned. I don't celebrate. Axel smirked. You do tonight. Kai sighed. We'll see. The grid filled with roaring engines as the final race began. 20 cars lined up under blazing lights. Millions of viewers watched around the world. The championship battle stood between two drivers, Axel Laurent, Victor Navarro. Inside the Apex garage, Kai watched the telemetry screens carefully. 5 red lights appeared above the track. 4, 3, 2, 1. The lights went out. The race began. Axel launched perfectly, but Victor reacted just as fast. The two cars raced side by side into the first corner. The crowd screamed. Inside the garage, engineers shouted. They're wheel to wheel. Axel refused to back down. Neither did Victor. For 20 laps, the two drivers battled fiercely. Overtakes, defensive maneuvers, near collisions. Neither driver gave an inch. But slowly Axel began pulling ahead. His car handled better. His lap times were faster. Kai's adjustments were working perfectly. Inside the Titan Motors garage, Victor watched the gap growing on his dashboard. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. He couldn't lose. Not now. Not after everything. Then Victor made a decision. A dangerous one. He activated a setting in his car that pushed the engine far beyond safe limits. His speed increased dramatically. Inside the Apex garage, Kai noticed the sudden change. Axel. Axel's voice came through the radio. Yeah. Navarro's pushing his engine too hard. Axel smirked behind the helmet. He's desperate. Kai frowned. That engine might fail. Axel shrugged. Then he'll crash. Kai watched the numbers carefully. Victor's car was gaining speed. Fast. Too fast. Kai suddenly realized something terrifying. If Victor's engine exploded while racing beside Axel, both cars could crash. Kai grabbed the radio again. Axel. Yeah. Don't fight him too hard. Axel blinked. What? Let him pass for a moment. Axel laughed. You're kidding. I'm serious. Axel's voice dropped. Mercer. What? I'm not giving up the lead. Kai's voice became sharp. Your safety is more important than one corner. Axel went quiet. Then he sighed. You're really serious about this? Yes. A long pause followed. Then Axel finally said, Fine. For the first time in months, Axel let Victor pass him. Victor sped ahead aggressively. But only 3 laps later, Victor's engine exploded. Smoke burst from the back of the Titan Motors car. The crowd gasped as Victor slowed down rapidly. Inside the Apex garage, the engineers stared at the screens. Kai exhaled slowly. Axel's voice came through the radio again. Good call. Kai didn't answer. Axel continued. You saved the race. With Victor out of the race, Axel drove the remaining laps calmly. When he crossed the finish line, he won. Again. The Apex garage exploded with cheers. Axel Laurent had become the new world champion once more. But as Axel parked the car and climbed out, his eyes searched the garage immediately. Not for the cameras. Not for the team manager. For Kai. He found him standing near the back of the garage. Calm. Quiet. Like always, Axel walked straight toward him. And for a moment, neither of them spoke. The championship had been decided. But something even more important was about to change. Part 10, the finish line. The roar of the crowd still echoed through the circuit. Cameras flashed everywhere as reporters rushed toward the Apex racing garage. Mechanics cheered, hugging each other while shouting in celebration. Axel Laurent had done it. Again. The champion of Formula One had secured another world title. For championships, at only 25 years old, the media was already calling it legendary. But Axel barely noticed any of it. After climbing out of the car and finishing the interviews, his eyes searched the garage for one person. Kai Mercer. He found him standing near the back wall, exactly where he always stood. Quiet, calm, watching everything without joining the celebration. Kai's tablet was still in his hands as he reviewed the final telemetry. Engine performance, tire degradation, race statistics. Everything had worked perfectly. But before he could finish reading the last line of data, a shadow appeared in front of him. Kai looked up. Axel Laurent stood there. His racing suit was still half unzipped, his dark hair messy from removing the helmet. But the usual arrogant smirk was missing. Instead, Axel looked thoughtful. You're still working? Axel asked. Kai shrugged slightly, checking the data. Axel leaned against the wall beside him. The race is over. I know. You won. Kai nodded. Yes. Axel studied him carefully. You're really not going to celebrate? Kai closed the tablet. I told you earlier. Axel raised an eyebrow. What? I don't celebrate. Axel sighed dramatically. You're impossible. Kai said nothing. Around them, the team continued cheering loudly. Music started playing somewhere in the garage, and champagne bottles popped open one after another. But the small corner where Axel and Kai stood felt strangely quiet. Axel crossed his arms. You know something, Mercer? Kai looked at him. What? Axel nodded toward the car parked in the garage. That machine wouldn't have survived half the season without you. Kai shook his head slightly. You drove it. Axel smirked faintly. Barely. Kai almost smiled. Almost. Axel continued. You fixed the suspension after the crash. Kai didn't reply. You noticed the sabotage. Silence. You told me to pit when the rear wing was about to fail. Kai looked away slightly. That was my job. Axel stepped closer. And today? Kai looked back at him. You told me to let Navarro pass. Axel's voice softened. That decision won the championship. Kai hesitated for a moment. Then he said quietly, You're still the one who crossed the finish line. Axel stared at him, then suddenly laughed. You really refuse to take credit for anything. Kai shrugged. I fix cars. Axel shook his head slowly. No. Kai frowned slightly. What do you mean? Axel took a step closer. You fix me too. Kai blinked. That doesn't make sense. Axel smiled faintly. When we first met, I thought you were just another mechanic. Kai crossed his arms. And you were an arrogant driver. Axel chuckled. Still am. Kai didn't argue with that, but Axel's expression grew more serious. You're the only person who tells me when I'm being stupid. Kai raised an eyebrow. That happens often. Axel laughed again. Exactly. Then Axel looked directly into his gray eyes. And you're the only person I actually listen to. Kai didn't know what to say. That admission felt heavier than it should. Around them, the team celebration grew louder. Someone shouted Axel's name across the garage. But Axel ignored them. Mercer, he said quietly. Kai waited. If you weren't here this season. He gestured toward the championship trophy across the garage. That wouldn't exist. Kai looked at the trophy too. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Kai said softly, You would have found another mechanic. Axel immediately shook his head. No. Kai frowned. Why? Axel smiled. Because no one else argues with me like you do. Kai let out a quiet breath. That's not a skill. It is when dealing with me. Kai couldn't deny that. Axel suddenly reached out and took the tablet from Kai's hands. Kai blinked in surprise. What are you doing? Axel placed the tablet on a nearby table. Stopping you from working for 5 minutes. Kai sighed. Axel. But before he could continue, Axel grabbed a champagne bottle from a nearby crate. He popped it open easily. Foam spilled over the top. Then he handed it to Kai. Kai stared at it. I told you. Axel smirked. You're celebrating tonight. Kai hesitated. The cheering team, the bright lights, the trophy, and Axel standing in front of him with that stubborn expression. Finally, Kai took the bottle. Axel grinned. There you go. Kai took a small sip. The taste made him wrinkle his nose slightly. Axel laughed. You look like you just drank engine oil. It's worse. Axel shook his head, still smiling. Then someone from the team shouted again. Laurent, we need you for the podium ceremony. Axel glanced toward them, then back at Kai. I should go. Kai nodded. Yes. But Axel didn't move immediately. Instead he said quietly, You're coming too. Kai frowned. The podium is for drivers. Axel shrugged. Then stand beside the garage and watch. Kai crossed his arms. I can watch from here. Axel stepped closer again. You're stubborn. Kai replied instantly. You're worse. Axel laughed. Fair. Then he walked toward the exit of the garage. But before leaving, he turned back once more. Hey, Mercer. Kai looked up. What? Axel smiled slightly. Next season. Kai waited. Try not to let anyone sabotage my car again. Kai rolled his eyes. I'll try. Axel nodded once. Then he disappeared toward the podium ceremony. Kai stood there quietly for a moment. The championship trophy glowed under the bright lights across the garage. And for the first time since joining Apex Racing, Kai allowed himself to feel something he usually ignored. Pride. Because the arrogant champion who once ignored everyone had trusted him when it mattered most. And somehow, between late nights in the garage, arguments over telemetry data, and the chaos of racing, Axel Laurent and Kai Mercer had crossed their own finish line. Not just as driver and mechanic, but as something far more important. Partners.
If you like the story, don't forget to like,
Subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notifications for more amazing stories.